Concordia University attacking its own students, the Democratic establishment attacking Bernie Sanders, and Justin Trudeau completely doesn't get the meaning of the word irony. It's time for another podcast. Not quite live from Forget the Box Studios in Montreal, this is the FTB Podcast, the only podcast you're listening to right now. Okay, let's meet our panel.
I'm Ethan Cox, an editor with Ricochet Media.
I'm Josh Davidson, a writer for Forget the Box.
I'm Jerry Gabriel, contributor to Forget the Box.
And I'm your host, Jason C. McLean. I like cats, and I didn't have that big a breakfast. And we are recording this on Sunday evening, March the 6th, 2016. We're going to talk in a little bit about what's happening south of the border in the Democratic primaries, and I guess the Republican primaries, all the primaries in general. There's actually a Democratic debate happening this evening, which we won't be talking about because it will be on after we record it. We're also going to be going into some really incredulous comments by Justin Trudeau about pipelines. But first, what have you heard about the Concordia Student Tribunals? Hannah Besseau has this report.
Concordia students picketed a political science class on April 1st, 2015, to enforce the PSSA's mandate to picket all political science classes. Departments at Concordia voted to go on strike as part of a larger student movement in 2015.
We have two things to do first before we strike. There's a class in Fine Arts being held at H110. We need to live that class. And there's a class in Gus. Yeah. H1245, we need to send at least 15 people there to live that class as well. And then everybody's in the street because our street is ours.
Given that student leaders did not commit any vandalism or block entrances, they were promised that they would not be charged under the Code of Conduct during the strike. However, several professors have filed charges against about 25 students who participated for disrupting their class. The Concordia administration has joined these professors as a co-complainant. Over the past year, a series of tribunals have been taking place to deal with this issue.
Okay, so Ethan, you've been covering this story for Ricochet. Tell us what's happening at Concordia with these tribunals.
Well, in a nutshell, in the spring of 2015, various departments at Concordia, including political science, voted to go on strike on April 1st and 2nd of 2015 as part of a larger student movement called Printemps 2015. And at the time, according to 9 student leaders who had a meeting with 3 senior members of the administration, they were promised that if students didn't commit any vandalism, weren't violent, and didn't block main entrances, that they wouldn't be charged under the Code of Conduct for participating in this student strike. Contrary to that assurance, a couple of professors filed charges against about 25 of the students who participated in the strike activity for disrupting their class, and the Concordia administration actually joined those complaints as a co-complainant. So we have 9 student leaders at Concordia who are saying very clearly that the administration promised them they wouldn't do this and then went back on their word. On the other hand, the university spokesperson is denying that any such assurances were ever given, but refusing to provide interviews with any of the 3 senior administrators who were actually in the room during the meeting. So what we've had is, over the past year now, a series of tribunals for student leaders. These are overly judicial processes. They can last up to 11 hours at a stretch. And 2 of those tribunals so far have had results. In both cases, they concluded by finding the students guilty of disrupting the school activity, but issuing them only a letter of reprimand, basically a slap on the wrist. And now the latest development that I reported on last week is that we found out one of these professors, Graham Dodds, is actually appealing that outcome in his tribunal, and he's seeking to get a harsher punishment against the students involved, so either expulsion or suspension. So at this point, with that appeal in sight, it could be another year of exceedingly long tribunals, of stress, of the threat of expulsion hanging over these students' heads. And for me as a journalist, looking at 2 years of this type of intense psychological pressure, it's hard to see the professors' actions here and the administration's actions in supporting them as anything other than abusive towards the students.
Can you, I guess, putting yourself in the head of the professor or the administration, is the goal really to actually get them expelled, or just to basically make sure that they don't take part in any other protests?
Well, I think it's very clear that leaders within the student movement were targeted. The vast majority of the people who were charged held elected positions within their student associations. So it seems very clear that the intention here on the part of the professors and the administration was to send a message. To make sure that students wouldn't dare strike in the future by really heavily punishing the leaders of that movement.
So is this something that, do you see ultimately that these are just going to be turned into non-convictions, or people or students are going to get basically a slap on the wrist? Or do you think that the university is, besides making the message, is actually going to try and expel these people?
Well, I don't think there's much of any chance that they're going to get expelled. I think the problem at this point, first and foremost, as the labor unions on campus have said, this is completely an inappropriate forum to resolve this kind of a problem. The Code of Conduct is designed to deal with individual cases of misconduct, plagiarism, assault, abusive behavior, these types of things. It's not designed to address political issues. And this is a political issue where the students in a particular department voted to strike, gave a mandate to their elected leaders. If their elected leaders hadn't upheld that mandate, then they would have been subject to getting expelled from their positions with the student association. So first and foremost, the process is fundamentally wrong in this case. And I doubt that any of these processes are going to end up with anything more than what we've already seen, which is a slap on the wrist. But once you look at these students being dragged through 2 years of judicial processes, the process itself becomes the punishment far more than what the outcome is.
Yeah, these are long. These processes also take away from class time or study time or the ability to actually be a student. That's
what I heard over and over again doing interviews with students at Concordia. People telling me that they had been A students, now they're B students, that the stress and time requirements of defending themselves against the administration and these professors had a major negative impact on their academic success and also on their mental health was another thing that I heard over and over again.
Yeah, could they theoretically actually countersue the administration for abuse? Is that a possibility?
Well, I'm sure it is. I don't know much about that, but it's certainly something I've heard discussed. Some sort of contrary action. The problem right now is really with these two professors, Graham Dodds, Michael Lipson. They're both young. They're both tenured professors. So they seem to really be getting a perverse sort of enjoyment out of really messing with these students. And I fear that if there aren't negative consequences for them in this case, if they don't see that they can't behave this way, that they can't be abusive towards students who they have a duty of care towards, then they're just going to go on and keep doing this again and again in the future. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it was so important to shine a light on this story and to get some broader public understanding of what's happening, because there's just, at the end of the day, these two professors are acting completely contrary to the mandate of their profession. As professors, they have a duty of care towards their students, and they are acting in an abusive and malicious way to try and do damage to students that are in their care. And that's outrageous to me.
Yeah, it sounds completely outrageous too.
Has this ever happened before at Concordia, where Concordia promised something to the student association and kind of took it back or lied to them in any way? Or is this maybe like the first time something like this has happened? I bet it's not the first time.
Well, I'd be surprised if it was the first time that the administration ever lied to anyone. What I can tell you is that in 2012, there were a number of students that were charged similarly under the Code of Conduct for disrupting academic activities for their participation in the strike that year. And when Alan Shepard came in as the new president of Concordia in the summer of 2012, one of his first actions after taking office was canceling all of those charges, which was taken at the time to be a recognition on his part and on his administration's part that this individual penal process was an inappropriate way to try and resolve what is fundamentally a collective political issue. And so I think that's one of the reasons that when students came into this strike process again, they sat down with senior members of his administration. According to them, they were given very clear assurances. And then when the administration turned around and joined these complaints, I think the students felt doubly betrayed on the one hand because they They felt they had been promised things, and on the other hand, because it was so contrary to how Alan Shepard had acted the past time in 2012 in terms of addressing these types of complaints.
Well, why do you think there is a different approach this time on the behalf of the administration? Are they just afraid of what these teachers might say? Are they afraid of is there any pressure from the provincial government or the Ministry of Education, to make an example? Or is it just that they're somehow forced to go along with their teachers?
Well, it's a good question. Speaking to people on campus for this story, it was very clear that these professors are outliers. Both of the professors' union, the part-time and the full-time faculty unions, as well as the teaching assistants union, all told their members not to cross picket lines. These profs went against their own union. And at this point, I had a quote in my story from Ben Prunty, who was the president of the CSU last year, saying that these professors at this point are basically holding everyone involved in the process hostage. And I think that's true. I think it's hard to understand why the administration joined with these professors. I've certainly heard people talking about how they were, afraid of what these professors would do if they didn't support them. I don't quite know what that means. I don't know what they had to be afraid of. I think it was the wrong choice on behalf of the administration. But at this point, it seems like they're sort of stuck with it, and they don't really know how to get out of the hole that they've dug for themselves.
What's a dignified way for them to walk away, the administration, to actually pull out of this one and not lose too much face?
Well, it's a judicial process that was initiated by the professors, so the administration can't just cancel it. But what they can do, and what they should have done since the beginning, is withdraw as co-complainants. It's messed up in the first place that you have a judicial process where the administration is the arbiter of that process, are actually the people overseeing the judicial process, and also are taking a side in it. They never should have been a co-complainant in it, leaving aside whatever they promised the students. They never should have been a co-complainant. If they promised the students that, and it certainly looks like they did, then they doubly should never have been a complainant. So I think it's very clear at this point that the students the administration needs to withdraw as a co-complainant. But the real thing is these professors, is Michael Lipson and Graham Dodds. And the one thing I would say is, if anyone out there is a Concordia student, if anyone has friends or family that's a Concordia student, warn them not to take classes with these guys, because I've never seen professors that just take such joy out of hurting students. It's messed up. It's really, really messed up. And I think it would be, if I was a student, I'd stay far away from those classes, that's for sure.
Well, I'm not a Concordia student anymore. It is my alma mater, but I definitely wouldn't take courses with either of those two professors. Nor would I be so afraid of Donald Trump if I was an American that I would vote for Hillary Clinton. I would still vote for Bernie Sanders, although the rhetoric or the discourse has changed after the last few primaries. Let's listen to this.
Now, tonight, you're going to see a lot of election results come in. And let me remind you of what the media often forgets about. This is not a general election. It's not winner take all. If you get 52%, you get 48%, you roughly end up with the same amount of delegates in a state. By the end of tonight, we are going to win many hundreds of delegates. Months ago, as you know, better than any other group in America, when we were out on the lake, we were at 3% in the polls. We have come a very long way in 10 months.
Bernie Sanders is not giving up. A lot of people think he shouldn't give up, but for the first few days, for a day or so after Super Tuesday, I saw all these articles saying basically that Clinton had won. She was the inevitable victor. Sanders should just pull back. And then I started seeing more logical articles that pointed to the fact that, wait a second, the Clinton firewall in the South was supposed to happen, and it happened. But Sanders didn't just win Vermont. He won Oklahoma. He won Colorado.
Minnesota.
He won Minnesota. Kansas. That since then, like he's still, and if you actually look at the number of real delegates, besides the number of super delegates, he's down by like roughly 100. That's about it. Like, it's not over yet, despite what some sites are saying. I mean, is this just the expected Clinton smear machine kicking in, or and the main thing though is will it be effective?
Funny thing is, it's kind of a circular argument. You see a lot of people saying, look, it's time for the Democratic Party to unite behind the clear delegate frontrunner, using the delegate count, which includes super delegates, right? And so I think there's a lot of people that are looking at things superficially and saying, oh, look at that, Clinton has 1,000 delegates, Sanders has, 400 and something. How's he ever going to catch her? But what they're missing is about 500 of those delegates are super delegates who are not committed. And those delegates, they're going to go where the majority of Democratic voters go. Let's not kid ourselves. Whatever friendships and alliances they have with the Clinton family, they're not going to vote against the results. So, what we've seen is we've seen Clinton have tremendous success in the South. But one of the criticisms that's been raised to that is that, of course, many of those states where Clinton's doing tremendously well, those are red states through and through. So those are going to vote for the Republican nominee in the general election no matter what happens. So, what a lot of people are asking is, if you're a superdelegate, aren't you more concerned about what's happening in swing states, in Florida, in Ohio, in these type of places? And, as you pointed out, the calendar for Sanders around Super Tuesday was really bad. It was a lot of these southern states. He just hasn't been able to get traction with the black population there. It's really hurting him. He's losing with women there as well. But now the playing field starts to even out. And we just saw this weekend wins for Sanders in Kansas and Nebraska. Again, lost in Louisiana, another southern state. But now we're going to be going into more northern states. And the real question for Sanders was not if he was going to win in states like Louisiana. I don't think anyone ever expected him to. The question was, could he get out of states like, New Hampshire, Vermont? Could he have appeal in sort of breadbasket states like Oklahoma, like Kansas, like Nebraska? The fact that he's won by large margins in states like that gives a lot of reason to think that he's going to have more success, because that's the kind of states that are coming up for the next couple of weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised to look back at this race in a few weeks and see the delegate count much, much closer. Clinton's going to maintain that superdelegate lead, but those superdelegates, they'll go whichever way the voters are.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you take out the superdelegates, especially, also the states recently that have been contested have been low delegate counts for the Democrats because they are Republican states. So when they get to Michigan, Ohio, there's way more at play. And I feel like that's something that's not... The focus on who won the state is so over-focused on the media, whereas the numbers are what matters. States like, was it Louisiana? I mean, how many delegates are even at play? I think it was like 15 or something.
And states with major, like Massachusetts, had major delegates, and that state was almost tied.
Because it depends on their track record there in the past, right? So I think that's overlooked, and you're right. The super delegate, you take that out, it's incredibly close.
And the other thing about looking at it in terms of wins and losses is that so far the vast majority of the states that we've seen aren't winner-take-all for delegates. They award them proportionally. So like Massachusetts, where it was so close between Clinton and Sanders, they're both walking away with basically the same number of delegates. Clinton's going to get, one more. So there's this big media narrative of like, hey, Clinton won Massachusetts. But really, most of these states we've seen, tight results, delegates going in both directions.
Which I think is what keeping people like Marco Rubio going.
Yeah.
He hasn't won a state, but he's like, but if you add it all up, I've come second enough times. And so there's this weird thing where you kind of do have to win some. Although I take you seriously, but at the end of the day, there's sort of two games they're playing. Right.
I have to say, on the Republican side, though, I think we can it's almost certain that Trump is going to take it on the Republican side. It's not the same story as the Democrats. Like, unless the Republican Party finds a way to mess him up.
Yeah, Cruz is not a good alternative. Like, he's just not
Wait, who is a good alternative?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't see any good alternatives.
But if you look at the list, I guess Trump is the best because he's funny, but he's racist. I don't know.
The other thing is, I think when they do those like head-to-head matchups, every potential possibility of both sides, I believe that actually Sanders does better, right, like for what it's worth in the polling versus Trump.
Against Trump and against
Sanders will beat Trump.
Well, the poll I heard was that Sanders beats, both Clinton and Sanders beat Trump, but Sanders actually beats Rubio and Cruz, and Clinton loses to them.
Well, this is the argument that Glenn Greenwald has made, right? We've got the pundit class sort of overwhelmingly saying Hillary Clinton is more electable. Whatever people may think of Sanders, Hillary Clinton is the logical choice because she's going to have an easier time beating somebody like Donald Trump. And then you look at the available evidence, and it's not just one poll, it's not just two polls, it's every single poll that has been done comparing Republican and Democratic frontrunners. Sanders outperforms Clinton against any of the Republicans, whether it's Cruz, Rubio, Trump. So you can argue that those polls, it's really far away from the election, they don't mean much, the Republican attack machine hasn't gotten into gear. You can make all of those arguments to say that those polls don't conclusively prove that Sanders is the more electable candidate, but there's just no basis in the data, none whatsoever, not a single poll, not a single number to suggest that Clinton is more electable. Her favorability rating is catastrophically worse than Sanders. And over again, we see in elections that favorability is one of the biggest indicators of vote. Yeah. So you can make an argument that it's not as clear-cut as the data might make it appear that Sanders is the more electable candidate, but you can't really make the argument that Clinton's more electable.
Then you have to acknowledge all the ghosts in her closet, or skeletons in her closet, which are just as much of a liability.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Clinton is a tarnished brand. Clinton is a tarnished brand. Sanders, one thing too, logically, he wasn't a Democrat till last year. He can win undecideds, the swing states. He can win over some Republicans who maybe are conservative in some ways, but really can't stand the Donald Trump, ultra right-wing racist.
I read this all the time on Reddit where people are like, oh, I'm going to go for libertarians will vote for Sanders. Like, he has libertarian cred. He has worked with Ron Paul on many.
Yes.
And so actually, he has the most pull of any candidate. So I noticed the skew because people are afraid of Trump, and then you can see this in the sort of liberal media or whatever you want to call it. Is it liberal? I don't know, maybe. But if you see CNN, there's such a skew towards Clinton. I mean, Sanders and Cruz did about the same, but Cruz was destroying Trump, and Sanders was hanging on for his bare life. That was what I got from. That's what, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think it's the same narrative too. And Donald Trump, I think, is part of the narrative that's pro-Clinton to a certain extent. It's the same way in Canada, Stephen Harper was part of the why we have to vote for the Liberals because he's so horrible.
And I think Sanders bringing up track record of her husband and calling her outsourcer in chief is that. If that sticks, then he can take Michigan. Because Michigan was burnt really badly by outsourcing.
Honestly, I actually unliked Slate on Facebook because I was so annoyed with so many. I've seen all these pro-Clinton posts, and I saw one. It was just too much, and they were talking about Oklahoma, and they were saying, it's mostly white people. Actually, no, Oklahoma has a very large Native population. I'm not sure how that factored into the vote, but I mean, just seeing that. I unlike Slate, so I liked Politico just to like something else, and then they published Hillary's done.
He's not doing well with African Americans, and what the Clintons hold is
in the South. It's different though. In the North, it's different.
If you see, for instance, Russell Simmons just came out endorsing Hillary Clinton, right? And he says, Bernie Sanders doesn't understand African Americans, but he hasn't said one insensitive thing. I haven't heard one thing.
It's totally split. Yeah.
Where's this? What is this?
Cornel West said that African American leaders who are supporting Hillary Clinton just are wrong.
Well, look, there's one thing that should be very clear, which is that Bernie Sanders has come out with a lot of surrogates to support him from the black community, and almost overwhelmingly, those are northern intellectual men. Right. Yeah, so you don't have to look too far to figure out why is the appeal not working as well in the South, because, black people in the South don't respond as well to being told what to do by Ta-Nehisi Coates or Spike Lee or, what they see as people who are very disconnected from their reality. I mean, I think on the Republican side right now, I think we have two possible outcomes. I think on the one hand, Trump can win it outright. On the other, we can go to a brokered convention. I don't think there's any path to victory. Cruz has been doing better recently. He's certainly staying alive, but I don't think there's an outright path to victory for either him or Rubio. And on the Democratic side, just to throw a little bit of cold water, because, we all like to get really excited about Bernie Sanders, but he is in trouble and he does have an uphill road to climb. And I really did think that he needed to win Nevada in order to maintain the momentum that he built. I think it really hurt him, that narrow loss in Nevada, then going into South Carolina, which he was expected to lose and did lose. And we're seeing the turnout not being as strong as you really need it to be for Sanders. If you're Sanders and you're looking at the results, the thing that doesn't bother you, you're not as worried about the outcome or the states that you've lost as you are the turnout. the only way that Sanders wins is with overwhelming turnout by bringing in a lot of new voters, and we're just not seeing that massive overwhelming turnout this year, and that I think is the biggest worry for Sanders.
Well, his voter base is largely the younger voters, and they're not. The biggest problem of appealing to younger voters is they're generally not the ones who go out and vote, like historically, and I think that might change. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think if Sanders was able to pull off a victory, maybe in like New York or a place like that, which is associated with Hillary Clinton because she was a senator from there. Like, if he was able to do that, I think that might be a real game changer.
I think Michigan's going to be extremely important. What goes down in Michigan is going to make and break Sanders. I think he needs to catch up. He's a little behind. If he can make that outsourcer in chief stick about the Clinton. And let me people laud the Clinton administration, but it wasn't that great an administration when you look at it. The amount of borrowing, the amount of outsourcing that just basically destroyed the U.S. economy. And also, don't forget that the subprime mortgages, where did they come from? The Clinton administration.
Continuing Reagan's policies. George W. Bush didn't make it much better, but Clinton was the key.
Hawks, they might as well be conservative.
But speaking of Michigan, we keep seeing polls coming out of Michigan showing Hillary Clinton with basically a 2-1 lead over Sanders. Yeah. So Michigan's important, but Sanders has a lot of ground to make up there. So again, if you look at the states that are coming up, the profile is much more appealing to Sanders. It's much more open. There are not so many of these southern states where he really doesn't seem to have a chance. But at the same time, Clinton's working very hard for those same votes. And it's, he's put himself in a little bit of a hole that he needs to dig out of.
One thing I would point out about the Sanders campaign is I think everyone's noticed that the amazing, you've noticed online, some of the amazing videos that his media team has put out. They've been really powerful videos. One of them had featured Erica Garner, a Black Lives Matter activist, daughter of Eric Garner, who was killed by the police. They're amazing. The one critique I would have about Sanders' messaging, though, is when he's doing these primary victory or concession speeches, he should really get away from his own stump speech. It seems like he's always saying the same points over and over again, which are powerful.
You'll ever get him.
I think he should stick to those points, but I think he should change it up a bit, at least in his speech delivery. I don't know if that's going to happen. But
his stump speech has been very effective for him.
I think he's a great speaker. Yeah.
But when you're talking about the videos, and I agree, the videos the campaign has put out are amazing, but they're just one part of it. Really, Sanders' campaign has built on what the Obama campaign did in 2008 and has brought forward, I think, probably the most sophisticated and successful digital campaign in political history. They're now significantly outraising Hillary Clinton. You heard that right. Sanders has more money now, and he is raising more money. He raised, I think it was $43 million in February, which is just absolutely astounding. So the one advantage that Sanders does have when he's saying, look, we're going to keep going, we're going to keep fighting this all the way through to the convention, is that he's got the money to keep fighting. And at this point, he's even got more than Clinton does. So the question is, can they spend it efficiently, and can they actually take advantage of that shocking advantage, right? Because into the end of last year, we were all talking about money as the big advantage Clinton had, but Sanders, by focusing on super PACs and by focusing on the effect of money in politics, has made it impossible. There are Clinton super PACs standing by, but they can't run ads against Sanders because those ads are just going to reinforce Sanders' own message that Clinton is bought and paid for. So she can't use the super PAC money, and she can't raise money as fast as Sanders can. And all of a sudden, Sanders has the money advantage, which is shocking.
Yeah.
Well, just going to say, the visceral look of annoyance on his face when they say, so are you thinking of sticking it out? I mean, he says sticking it out. I mean, yeah, exactly. We are raising more money. And what we've done in such a short period, he's just almost insulted. And I love that he does not, he can't really hide how he feels.
No filter.
And it's usually followed by, and let me just say. Let me just say. But the only other little tidbit, I don't know if anyone else had heard this. I thought it was a conspiracy theory at first. This is literally like last night. Talk about the brokered convention. There is really, as Ted Cruz, everyone's freaking out because he's such a poor alternative, even within the party. So Romney, and you know how Romney came out with a speech against Trump, but would not endorse anybody, right? So some journalist did anyone see this? Went in and actually found his filings, and he had refiled his own whatever with the FEC that same night with Paul Ryan on the filing as well. And they apparently have a lot of money. They're out of debt, and they're somewhere like around $1 million or something in the clear. And they renamed it. It's now called like Romney for President 2016 or something. And it was like they actually found the filing. You can go look at it. So it's more than just conspiracy. I think they're keeping it in the back pocket, and it's very publicly out there that he's got all the paperwork in order and he's got money.
So
He's
Romney
got
might
Paul
actually-
Ryan ready to go with him.
Might actually try to take on Trump.
Well, that's pretty funny. I mean, if the Republican Party goes back to what is sort of universally acknowledged to be a disastrous failure of a candidate as, their great white hope that's going to save them from this
happened
disaster.
before.
Sadly, where they're kind of
It's happened
thinking
before.
is
You
going.
can challenge a candidate.
What's that?
You can challenge a candidate at the convention.
Yeah.
You can steal all their delegates. It's
right.
possible.
One thing I learned from the West Wing is you can get nominated from the floor. Also, the sitting president can endorse a candidate in his own party until the party's picked a leader. But, the thing with Romney and Donald Trump, and at least the Romney thing, is it shows that one of the reasons the Republicans probably hate Trump so much is that they know he can't win a general election. So the fear factor that the Democrats are putting in about Donald Trump is very reminiscent of a fear factor we had here in Canada about Stephen Harper, which ultimately led to a Liberal government. And our current Liberal Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, had some very interesting things to say the other day. Let's listen to that.
You're trying to suggest that there are people in any part of the country that don't both want growth and jobs for the economy and a protected environment. Well, then I think you're mistaken. Because the fact is, Canadians are united right across the country about wanting the kind of future for their kids and for their communities that we know we need to be building. And at the same time, make sure we're doing it in a responsible, sustainable, environmentally sound way. That's something that Albertans and Quebecers and everyone across the country is united in wanting. The discussions that, quite frankly, are a strength for Canada, is how best to do it. And people come at these challenges with a huge range of perspectives and solutions that they want to offer up and priorities that they put above others. But you know what? When we look at that diversity and range of voices, yes, it's a little more challenging to come to figure out that right place in the middle, but just as the way we've assembled an extraordinary range of voices and perspectives in this Smart Prosperity Initiative, we realize that multiple perspectives lead us to better solutions.
So Justin Trudeau thinks that the way to clean energy is through pipelines, and that's about as silly as saying you're going to fight quote-unquote anti-terrorism bill by voting for, oh, wait, they already did that. Yeah, typical liberal doublespeak. I mean, pipelines as a way to fund clean energy initiatives, that sounds a little bit pie in the sky, a little bit cake and eat it too. Maybe I'm out on a limb here, but it doesn't seem to be like a very good idea.
Yeah, the bottom line is this is what Trudeau's been saying ever since the election. He went to Paris amid great fanfare, and he committed us to holding global warming to 1.5 degrees, which is a very stringent target that requires a lot of immediate action. According to studies published in the journal Nature, 85% of the tar sands needs to stay in the ground in order to meet that target. And then at the same time, he's supporting pipelines like Energy East that would move 1.1 million barrels of oil a day out of the tar sands, and like Kinder Morgan. And so there's a fundamental logical non sequitur here. As the Prime Minister, as the government, he can say, as Harper did, we think that the economic argument is more important. We're going to build these pipelines no matter what, and if that increases our emissions, so be it. Or he can be the climate change fighter that he was in Paris and say, we're going to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees. But he simply cannot do both. They're completely incompatible. You just cannot build pipelines and also make meaningful progress towards emissions reductions. The two are completely incompatible.
Has he released any specific kind of numbers in terms of this is the most efficient way to...
No, not only has he not released any specific numbers, the Canadian government's climate change targets are still the Harper government's targets because the Trudeau government has not released any new updated targets. So really what we've seen from the Trudeau government is a lot of good talk. And that talk has worked, and Canada is back, and sunny ways, and all of this stuff. But in functional, practical terms, they've done absolutely nothing on climate change. And again, we saw, last week, all of the premiers meeting with the government, and what comes out of that, we're going to have a strategy, an action plan on climate change. There's an agreement to have more meetings and to talk more about the issue without any sort of concrete commitments.
I would disagree. There was something quite concrete. They had some great shots of him getting into a little yellow electric car that I think were pretty incredible. Like those were very concrete. He got right in. He touched the wheel.
The symbolism was concrete, eh?
Oh yeah, the imagery with Trudeau is great. Like he's great with the imagery. It's like originally what the target was 50,000 refugees, and then it went down to like, hey, would you take 500? And it kind of reminds me.
They're almost at that target. They're almost at that 25,000. Yeah, that's one thing you can't fault them on.
True.
They took a little bit longer than they promised, but they did come through.
Although it reminds me of that show Get Smart. I don't know if you guys remember that. It's Maxwell Smart, a secret agent, and he would say something to the effect of like, "I've got a whole armada waiting to take you." I'm like, I don't believe that. Okay, would you believe I have 2 battle carriers waiting to take you? Okay, how about 3 guys in a rowboat and a really angry dog? Would you believe? No. With the refugees he did ultimately deliver, but I don't think I don't think he can deliver with climate change, and I think the Trudeau photo op is all it's going to be. I think he likes to play to the left, but really govern from the right, which is typical Liberal policy.
But I'll tell you this. I think that Energy East is dead, and I think it's dead not just because of the overwhelming grassroots opposition in Quebec, which is a significant factor, but it's dead because the business case for Energy East is dead. There was a great article in iPolitics last week laying this out. There's a cost to getting oil to the southern United States by pipeline. It's around $7.50 to $10 a barrel. Now, in the past, the reason pipelines were so attractive is because the price gap was about $25 between what you could buy a barrel of oil for in the southern U.S. and what one coming out of the tar sands cost. Now we've got a lot more supply on the market. The price has really dropped, and now the price is lower than what it would cost to get the oil down there. So, if Keystone XL hadn't already been killed, it would be dead now because the business case isn't there for it. And the same thing is true of Energy East. So ultimately, I think it's never been clearer that Energy East isn't going to get built. I think one of the last straws, one of the last nails in the coffin was when Brad Wall tried to make it a national unity issue, threatening to hold up equalization payments to Quebec, demonstrating that he has no idea what equalization payments are or where that money comes from. The ignorance on that front was astonishing. But of course, the Quebec population was already massively opposed to this pipeline. Then they got poked in the eye by Western premiers who were saying, do what we tell you or else.
And Rick Mercer.
And Rick Mercer, which, as we all know, is not a very good way of convincing Quebecers to do anything. And now the business case has fallen apart. So I think Energy East is less likely to be built than it's been at any point since it was proposed.
But yet our Prime Minister still seems to support it. And honestly, I lost a lot of respect for Rick Mercer. I've always loved Rick Mercer, but when he made that speech against Denis Coderre. I always thought if I ever was going to take a side, if there was ever going to be a dispute between Denis Coderre and Rick Mercer, I would take Rick Mercer's side, but not in this case. I despise Coderre, but he actually made the right choice with that one. And it isn't the fact that our Prime Minister hasn't woken up to that. It must just be his for political reasons. It's fear of the right wing of his own party, fear of the right wing from Alberta, from the Conservative Party, and it's really a shame. Doesn't he understand he has a majority government? Can't he start acting like it?
Well, you're assuming that what he wants is to deny the pipeline, and I think that's the opposite. I think that what Trudeau would like to do is approve the pipeline, and the reason why he's not more in favor of it is because of how powerful the opposition has been. Don't forget that the co-chair of the Liberal campaign was a guy named Dan Gagné, and it came out towards the end of the election campaign that he was actually on the payroll of TransCanada to lobby for the pipeline at the same time that he was the co-chair of the Liberal campaign. So you look at something like that, and it gives you a little peek behind the curtain at how these things work, right? Are they really against the pipeline when one of their most senior people is at the same time being paid to lobby for it? I don't think so. So I think the Liberals really want to approve Energy East, but they just aren't able to be more supportive of it than they are currently being because of just how strong the opposition to it is.
No, it's a real shame that we picked a faux progressive, although one thing I have to point out there too, Tom Mulcair with the NDP back during the last campaign, he was not against Energy East either. That could have just been fear or fear or desire to be elected, but I think maybe it's at least cause for the NDP to reevaluate their strategy on this one.
Yeah, well, maybe the NDP can go back to being the NDP and the Liberals can go back to being the Liberals.
That would be nice, yeah.
Going back to being the Liberals. They tried to pretend to be the NDP for a month or two. Yeah. How's the legalization of marijuana going?
Yeah, apparently apparently it's being stalled by the fact that apparently there's international treaties against
they can't do
pot
it.
being
Oh,
legal.
of
Yeah.
course. Sorry.
Which would time it well if they could just sort of leave that to year 3 or 4, right before the next election.
That's
To act on that. Just one little question, seeing as we have all like NDP experts in the room. What is your collective view of the future of Mulcair? Like, what's going to happen? Because I read all these conflicting things.
I personally think Mulcair is finished as NDP leader.
I think if Bernie Sanders becomes president of the United States, Mulcair is finished with the NDP.
I don't know who could replace him.
I think what you're seeing in the NDP among the membership is overwhelming dissatisfaction with Tom Mulcair as leader. I think it's pretty hard to find anybody who says, yeah, they want Tom Mulcair to be the leader going into the next election. There's a lot of looking at Bernie Sanders in sort of envy. Jerry Kaplan's written in the Globe sort of saying, yeah, I guess Mulcair's okay, but we really need our own Bernie Sanders. I think the question is there's a leadership review at an NDP convention that's happening out west this month, at the end of this month. And I think what the question is for a lot of NDPers is, do we ditch Mulcair now or do we wait and ditch him later? Because there's going to be a certain amount of trepidation about ditching the leader when there's not a clear successor in place. And there's also going to be people arguing within that party that, look, he's an effective performer in question period. He's an effective leader of the opposition. Obviously, he can't get it done in an election, but maybe there's value in letting him be the caretaker for some more time. I think the other thing that's important to point out is that one of the things that happened shortly after the election loss was that Tom Mulcair hired Ray Guardia as his chief of staff. And Ray Guardia is sort of one of Tom Mulcair's biggest enemies in the party. He was Brian Topp's campaign manager in the leadership election. He was, basically unceremoniously fired by Tom when he came in. He was brought back in, and just a week or two ago, we saw that Ricardo Filippone was brought in as the director of communications. He was Peggy Nash's campaign manager in the leadership, and he also really didn't get along with Tom. And so I think when you see people like that coming in, they're probably not coming in because they really want to work for Tom Mulcair in the next election. They're probably coming in because they see that Tom Mulcair is on his way out, and they want to get in there and position themselves for whoever the next leader is going to be. So I think there's a certain amount of inevitability to the fact that Tom Mulcair is going to give up the leadership at some point between now and the next election. Whether he does it on his own terms or whether he's forced out the door at the end of the month, I think is the open question.
Because I was hoping that the leadership evaluation would have been after the U.S. election, because then if a self-avowed democratic socialist can become president of the empire, so to speak, what excuse does the leader of the left party in a center-left country have for taking socialism out of the party platform, if you really want to think about that?
And I really think just Tom Mulcair kind of purged the heart out of the NDP. I don't know. The campaign with Jacqueline and the campaign with Tom Mulcair was apples and oranges,
Well, Trudeau even
completely different.
Trudeau even admitted when Mulcair said he wanted a Harper-style balanced budget. Trudeau knew that that's when he had won the election. Yeah. And Trudeau's whatever he is, he's not ugly, as we've established, and he's not stupid. So I think he realizes that, and I think the NDP didn't, and it's a real shame. And there's a lot of things that are not ugly and not stupid coming up in Montreal in the next few weeks. So let's listen to the community calendar.
Thursday, March 10 at 7 p.m., join the Learning How to Scream series for this week's topic on lesbian urbanism, looking back at Montreal's lesbian spatial practices. Lesbians have historically been described as invisible in urban space. However, recent queer critiques increasingly describe them, along with gay men, as homonormative agents of metronormativities. Join Dr. Podmore, an affiliate assistant professor in the Department of Geography at John Abbott College, for more on this discussion. The event takes place at Cupid Concordia. Saturday, 9:30 p.m., the band The Holds are joining the Empty Yellers for a fun concert event at Turbo House. Doors open at 9 p.m. March 14th kicks off Israeli Apartheid Week. The 10-day event will host a variety of panels, workshops, film screenings, and demonstrations to raise awareness around the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against Israeli apartheid. Revolution They Wrote is proud to present the second annual Short Works Theater Festival. The event starts on March 17th at 8 p.m. at Café Cleopatra. Saturday, March 19th, join band Desert Bloom for a show along with Alexia Avina. Doors open at 8, show begins at 9, and it's $5 to $7 suggested donation, but ultimately pay what you can.
That was the community calendar. Now let's do predictions.
I think within the next 2 weeks, Marco Rubio is going to drop out of the Republican primary.
I think Hillary Clinton will be caught cheating on Bill Clinton with an intern. Hopefully.
I think Romney for president will be the successful name of a new run based on these FEC filings, and we're going to see real new hopeful messages for the U.S.
I think that our climate will continue to deteriorate and our addiction to fossil fuels will continue at least for the next 2 weeks.
Well, see, this is a joke prediction, and you'll have to hang in with me there. I'm going to predict that the chief of the Montreal Police is going to resign within the next 2 weeks, and that's a joke because it's never going to happen. It should happen. It shouldn't be a joke. But sadly, with the police the way they are, there's just no accountability, so that's a joke.
I predict that Bernie Sanders will run and probably get most of the northern eastern states, including New York.
I predict Trump and Sanders will run into each other in the New York, I guess it's primary or whatever they do there, and just share a nice little smoke meat sandwich.
And I predict that Hillary Clinton will finally provide the solution everyone's looking for by choosing to run as a Republican, beating Donald Trump in the primaries and then losing to Bernie Sanders in the general election. So that's our podcast. Thank you to everyone. You can read Josh on Forget the Box. Ethan, we can read you at ricochet.media. Jerry on Forget the Box. And also we can hear you on several other radio programs. Tommy Schnurmacher, Ethan, not Jerry. So thanks, guys. We'll catch you again in 2 weeks for the next podcast. The FTB podcast by the Forget the Box Media Collective in Montreal was hosted by Jason C. McLean and produced by Hannah Besseau. For daily, unique, original content covering news, music, politics, arts, lifestyles, food, film, you name it, we've got it. Check out forgetthebox.net.